I want to normalize it, that it is okay to feel completely lost within the first 3 to 6 months. There is value in being the type of person that asks valuable questions. Oh, but what's the difference between filing New York cases and LA cases? The only mistake that you will make is dwelling on your mistakes. One of the most valuable lessons that I have learned, understand that discipline is way more important than motivation, because motivation is temporary. You are not always going to feel motivated. You are not always going to feel confident. Even the way you show up to work, the clothes that you wear, and the way you present yourself has a direct effect on your productivity level and how much you accomplish in the day. Hey everyone, what's up, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new, my name is Icie and I'm so happy to have you here. I am really excited for today's video. First of all, we are doing a sit down video, which I haven't done one of these videos in a while. I think it's been a couple months. Recently I've been doing more vlogs, work vlogs, things like that, just because it's been easier, and I haven't done a proper sit down video, but I'm really excited for today's video because in this video I'm going to be telling you the 10 tips I wish I knew before I was a legal assistant. The number one thing I would say, probably the thing that helped boost my channel, were my legal assistant videos and sharing my experience as a legal assistant. So I will get into a little bit of my background so you guys have a bit of a context of how I got started in this and what I do exactly. These are things that I have learned over the past almost 2 years I've been as a legal assistant. I also jotted down frequently asked questions, so we will do a rapid fire of those at the end of this video. But without further ado, if any of this stuff sounds interesting to you, or you want to get into the legal industry, or you've been thinking about it, or you want a little bit of insight about what to expect and the things that I would tell my younger self, then just keep watching this video. I feel that it is only fitting to tell you guys who are new to my channel exactly what I do, what type of education I had before I became a legal assistant, and a little bit of just a background. I am a legal assistant for an employment law firm. I have been working for my law firm now for almost 2 years. My 2-year mark will be in March, which is crazy to think about that it's been that amount of time. I graduated from a 4-year university here in San Diego with a bachelor's in political science with a minor in literature and writing. Fast forward a few months later, I ended up applying to the job that I have right now. When I was a senior in college, I tried to gain like a part-time legal assistant job, but a lot of them were looking for full-time employees, and also with candidates who had experience, which obviously as a college student who was full-time, I didn't have that. But thankfully I was able to get a legal internship, which I think did help in some ways benefit me to get the job that I have right now. So let's get into the 10 tips on what I wish I knew before becoming a legal assistant. The first thing that I wrote down is that the first 3 months will be the hardest. I am not gonna lie and sugarcoat it. I wanna also preface this by saying that I had no legal experience, so I think for some of you who maybe came in with a little bit of experience, this may not be the case for you. Also keep in mind that whenever I give these tips, these are just from my own experience. Obviously, you can have a different experience. It also depends on the type of law you get into, the type of law firm you work for, the company culture. All of those things play a factor in how you receive the information and how you learn. But for me at least, and what I would say in general, the first 3 months working for a law firm are the hardest, because you are learning all of the different software, you're learning the company culture, and if you are a freshly graduated college student, then of course all of these things are going to seem extremely overwhelming. You're going to feel like you don't know what to do. And I included this in the video and as the first thing I wanted to start with, just because I want to normalize it, that it is okay to feel completely lost within the first 3 to 6 months. Don't set unrealistic expectations for yourself. It's not always going to be that way. It's temporary, you're gonna learn, and just like with anything in life, just how you learn how to ride a bike or how you learn how to swim, when you were thrown into a situation, it's gonna feel really hard in the beginning just because you are having to rewire your brain and you're having to learn new vocabulary, for example. You're having to learn like the different type of filings there are. You know, the legal field is a very complex and detail-oriented industry. So I just want to start with that if you're feeling overwhelmed and you feel like quitting, just know that I was there and it's a completely normal feeling, but that doesn't mean that you should actually quit. And that brings me to my next point, which is accept that you are going to make mistakes. Something that I wish I would have been more easy on myself in the beginning was not beating myself up so much over every little mistake that I made. I remember one time I sent, I think, the wrong Dropbox link to a client, and I literally thought that I was gonna be fired or that it was the worst thing in the world. And I would say 9 out of 10 times the mistakes that you make aren't that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. Now, that's not to diminish the possibility of making a big mistake, and I'm definitely not encouraging you to be careless or to not be conscientious of the type of work that you do. It's extremely important that you are paying attention and that you try your best to mitigate the mistakes and errors, but just knowing that mistakes are inevitable. And I think this goes with any industry that you try and any new job that you do. You have to give yourself that, that grace and that learning curve, because it's just unrealistic to think that you are not going to make a mistake. And when you do make a mistake, learn from it. Don't beat yourself up over it, because there's no point in being super self-critical about yourself and then getting in your head about, oh, this is why I should quit. And that's kind of something that I ran into that habit of doing, where I would make a mistake and then I would try to affirm myself that that was a reason for me to quit, when in reality that was just the process and that was just me learning the ropes and getting used to everything. So if you make a mistake, learn from it and don't get too much in your head about it, because honestly, the only mistake that you will make is dwelling on your mistake. While you are dwelling on this mistake, you could be learning something else, or you could be researching how to become better at it. And I think that is a more productive use of your time. So the next tip that I have is all about choosing the right people and choosing 1 to 2 people, whether it's coworkers or maybe an attorney. Choose people that you feel comfortable going to ask questions. Take that opportunity to build that connection. And I think in general, it's just really good to build your network while you're in the legal industry. My next tip is kind of a small thing, but for the first 3 to 6 months, I recommend showing up to work at least 30 to 45 minutes early. When you are learning all these things, it can feel super overwhelming. So giving yourself a little bit of time before the day begins and before all of the craziness begins, it can help you ease into the day. And obviously, because you're starting something new, you're not going to be as quick when it comes to this information. It's going to take you some time for these things to become second nature. So I think the more time you spend at your law firm and the more time you make an effort to expose yourself to the people, to the documents, to the software you're using, I think that can just only benefit you. So that's just a small thing that I would recommend. And if it's not too much of an inconvenience and if it's realistic for you, try to come to work maybe 15-20 minutes early. Every little minute counts. My next tip is to have at least one morning ritual. Whether it's making your favorite cup of coffee, there are things that I think can help ground you when you are doing something that can feel very intimidating and overwhelming. And I think just having habitual things in the morning that make you feel comforted, that make you feel at peace, can just help you start your day a little bit better. The next tip is probably one of the most valuable lessons that I have learned, not only in the legal industry, but also just in general as an adult, and that is to understand that discipline is way more important than motivation. Because Motivation is temporary. You are not always going to feel motivated. You are not always going to feel confident when you are a legal assistant. Show up to work with a positive attitude and understand that just by showing up, you are building your resilience and your discipline to become better at your job. And that's the only way that you are going to become a better legal assistant, a better athlete, a better anything, is by showing up and doing the work and being disciplined about that. Be gentle on yourself. Take as many breaks as you need, but don't quit, and definitely show up and understand that being disciplined is way more important than feeling motivated to go to work or to master a new skill or to learn a new process as a legal assistant. The next tip that I have is to focus on mastering one thing at a time. I think a lot of the times when you are a legal assistant, depending on what part of the process you're in, depending on what type of law you're doing, it can feel very overwhelming because you're thinking about all of the things that you need to remember. You're thinking about, oh, I need to remember what this attorney needs, and then I need to remember how to file this complaint. Oh, but what's the difference between filing New York cases and LA cases? Like, there's so many things that you have to keep track of, and it can be a lot. So what I would recommend is to master one thing at a time if you can, because if you master one thing, I find that everything else kind of follows suit and it kind of clicks. If you try and look at everything from a whole, it's gonna feel overwhelming. But if you look at one area of your role and what you can focus on that day, it's gonna feel a lot more manageable, and I promise you, it's gonna help you understand the other moving parts in the process. Okay, the next tip that I have is to ask questions. Ask as many questions as you can. There is value in being the type of person that asks valuable questions. I think that when people are able to take accountability and just say, hey, I genuinely don't know how to do this. Can you please guide me, or can you please point me in the direction of who would know this information? I think that's very respectable, and I think anyone who is a good leader or a good manager would see that and take your initiative to learn and to understand this process as a positive thing and not a drawback. I think it actually makes you stand out from the people who don't bother to ask questions. Sometimes just by clarifying it, you can save yourself so many mistakes, you can save yourself so much time. So don't worry so much about looking stupid or asking a dumb question. And even if it is a dumb question, you know what? At least you know the answer. At least you are learning and taking charge of your learning experience. I think that benefits you way more in the long term rather than just trying to solo it and suffering in silence, because that just is a recipe for disaster. My next tip is to make your workspace an environment that you enjoy working in. I have the pleasure of having my own office space. You guys have seen it in some of my work vlogs. And recently I have been slowly adding personal touches to it, like my calendar and having like a phone holder. Now I understand that not everyone has the privilege of having their own dedicated space, and you may be working in a cubicle or maybe you're working with other people, but I think just adding maybe a photo here or there, or keeping your desk space clean, keeping your desktop clean, trying to clear out your files when you can, make it an enjoyable experience to come into work, because I really believe that when your environment is set up to make you succeed, you're gonna wanna succeed and you're going to wanna be productive. Even the way you show up to work, the clothes that you wear and the way you present yourself has a direct effect on your productivity level and how much you accomplish in the day. And my last tip, if I were to sum it all up, I would just say, give yourself grace. This was something that one of my good friends, she is starting out as a paralegal, and she asked, what advice do you give to me, basically? And I told her, give yourself grace. It goes back to everything that I've said before in this video, that it's gonna be tough, it's gonna be hard, it's gonna be overwhelming. I don't wanna sugarcoat it, because I think I want to be honest with you guys, and I want to be honest about my experience, and the only way that you get better at it and the only way that you truly can succeed as a legal assistant and in any industry for that matter, is to believe in yourself. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to make mistakes. It just means that you give yourself grace when you do make those mistakes. The other part about this is believing you're already at the level that you want to be. You can call this faking it until you make it, faking your confidence, but just remember that they hired you for a specific reason. They saw potential in you, and on the days that you doubt yourself and on the moments that you want to quit and that you think you're not good enough or that you're never going to get anything, just remember that everyone has started at this point. Everyone has always had a starting point. Even the person that's training you has been where you are. And the only way that they were able to move past that and they were able to move forward is by sticking to it and seeing it through and not quitting. And that's just kind of the way life is in general. In order to succeed, in order to get better at something, it just takes practice. Now I'm going to go through frequently asked questions. I'm going to go through these as rapid fire questions, and then that will be the end of the video. One question that I get asked a lot is, do you need experience to be a legal assistant? And what I would say to that is, it definitely helps, but I don't think it's necessary. I always say this to people who DM me. They're like, how do I even get into the legal industry if every job that I am applying for requires me to get legal experience? And it's kind of this catch-22 where in order to gain experience, you have to have experience. And the best way that I would say to overcome that roadblock is to highlight your transferable skills. If you don't have any legal experience, maybe you worked in customer retail. Highlight how dealing with a high volume of customers in a very stressful environment makes you a very strong candidate and makes you a great leader. You know how to multitask. Or especially if you are bilingual, highlight how you speak Spanish. There are things that you can do in your interview that can make you stand out. I think that if you approach the interview with a confidence of and a behavior of, hey, I don't have this experience, but I do have these skills that will make me a great legal assistant. And if you approach it that way and you are able to tell your story and sell your resume in a way that highlights those skills, I don't think it completely knocks you out of the game. I think a lot of people get tripped up with, well, I don't have X, Y, and Z, so I shouldn't even try. But the thing is that you just have to keep trying and being persistent. Like I said before, it took me a while to get a law firm that actually trusted me and that actually extended an offer. In fact, I think before I graduated, I was rejected by every law firm that I applied for. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I was still a student and I wasn't able to work full time. Do you need experience as a legal assistant? No. And I would say highlight your transferable skills if you don't have any legal experience. What type of degree, education do you need to become a legal assistant? So I don't know how other countries work. I don't know how other law firms work, but I would say in general, law firms look for at least a bachelor's degree in a related field. I have a bachelor's degree in political science with a minor in literature and writing. Is it necessary? I don't know, because every law firm is different, but I would say by and large, from what I've seen and the way my law firm is, they look for a bachelor's degree to be a legal assistant. The other thing that I would say with this question is that a lot of companies, even if you don't have a bachelor's degree right now, sometimes there are positions that don't require a degree necessarily, but you can still get your foot in the door of a law firm, and through that, you can work your way up. For example, at my law firm, I know to be a legal assistant, they look for a bachelor's degree, but I know for intake specialist, they don't necessarily look at that. But I do know people who have started in reception or who started as an intake specialist and now they are legal assistants or paralegals. So you can definitely work your way up. And I would say just use any entry or offer as an opportunity to grow. Biggest advice for gaining confidence as a legal assistant. I sort of answered this already, but I would say if I were to summarize it, is shift your mindset when it comes to making mistakes as an opportunity to grow. The best use of your time is when you are being productive about it and trying to use every mistake that you make or feedback that you get or constructive criticism as a way to make yourself feel better. Don't take everything as a personal attack on your character. Now, if you are working with a company who is not giving you the proper tools to succeed, that is a completely different story that we could talk about in another video. But I think if they're just trying to make you become better, or they're just giving you constructive criticism, try not to get too much in your head about it and just try to see it as, oh, they want me to grow, they want me to be successful in this role. And I would say take it as that way. How to deal with strict management. I would say you really have to analyze it from a more objective point of view and try to take your emotions out of it. Like when a manager is giving you constructive criticism, is it professional? Is it useful? Or are they just nitpicking you? And I know that's very hard to discern sometimes, and sometimes it's only after the fact that we are able to have that clarity and understanding of the situation and of that relationship that we had with our managers. But I would try to look at it in that way, and also try to have communication with them. I think the biggest thing that you can do as well is, if you are feeling like you're struggling or you're not getting something, communicate that with your manager. Ask them, hey, I know that this is really important for succeeding in this role. I feel like I'm not getting it. Do you have time to have a meeting with me where we can sit down and figure out a way for me to understand this better? You know, that's just kind of a broad example of how you can approach the situation. I want to be a legal assistant. Where do I start? How do I apply? And how do I just begin the process? I guess there's two ways I would answer it. I think if you are younger and you are going into college, I would say definitely go with a field that is related in some way to law, like psychology or political science, economics. Those are just some of the examples. Certain universities I know may have pre-law programs, so I would also look into that if you are a student who is looking to further your education. Now, if you are older and you're not looking necessarily to go through the education route, I would say just apply. You know, try to get, like I said, an intake specialist job or a very entry-level job and just see what it's like. I think the best way to understand if something is for you is just to try it out for yourself. And the only way that you're gonna know is by actually throwing yourself into the fire and testing the situation out for yourself, and just making that decision once you've had that experience. And that's how I would say is to just start. Try not to get too much into your head about, oh, I don't have enough experience, or they're not gonna want me because I don't have this or that. My camera ran out of storage, so I had to restart it, and my camera's also about to die. So I am going to wrap this up really quickly. Also, if you're a student, something else to consider is to try to get an internship. That's what I did, because I wasn't having any luck getting into a law firm, and I think a lot of that had to do with me not being able to work full-time, and they wanted full-time employees. So if that is something that you have come across, then I would say try out a legal internship. A lot of these legal internships are catered towards students who want to gain legal experience, but obviously they are not in any place to commit to a full-time job, and you know, they are focused on school. And so that's a really easy way to sort of integrate yourself and just expose yourself to the legal field. But there's definitely possibilities and opportunities if you are willing to put in the effort and put in the time. Okay guys, those were my 10 tips on advice I would give for my younger self and what I wish I knew before I was a legal assistant. I hope this video was helpful, and if it was, make sure to give me a thumbs up. I have plenty of work vlogs and other legal assistant material. I will leave the playlist at the end of this video that you guys can go ahead and check out. And with that said, I will see you in another video. Bye guys.